2.6 million Filipino-Americans have cast their ballots in this year's U.S. election. Now, how's their experience and what are their fearless forecasts? Let's get to know this with some Filipino-American voters. Joining us again are Republican John Jose and Democrats Gabriel Young and Josh De Leon. Welcome back, guys. Good morning from the Philippines.
Gandang gabi. Good morning. Good morning,
Good morning.
everybody. Gandang umaga sa inyo.
All right. So, can you tell us what was the atmosphere there? Let's start off with Gabriel.
The atmosphere is everyone is stressed out of their minds, looking at the screen, looking at this math, trying to figure out if it's gonna be real or not what we're seeing. But I think there is a lot of hope, and I'm not gonna say a lot of hope on just one side, but there's a lot of hope on both sides. So I will also preface this: I have friends on the Republican side. John is my friend, for example. Josh is my friend, and we're all here, and we're both hopeful for our candidates. And so while we are stressed that we might not get the outcomes that we personally like, it is very much possible that it can swing either way, especially as you all were talking about earlier. Some votes do get counted later than others, like in Arizona. So I guess it's just us just twiddling our thumbs, waiting till Thursday to actually get the results.
What about you, John?
Yeah, I mean, on the Republican side, obviously we're very optimistic, but we're very cautiously optimistic as well. We understand that the numbers do come in a lot later as well. But what we're seeing right now in some of the battleground districts, in the House races, we're seeing a lot more strengths from the messaging that the Republicans have been pushing out, since the messaging that President Trump has been pushing out. So it's been really resonating in terms of early voting for the Republican Party, and then also for the election day turnout as well. So it seems like an early optimistic night for us, but as a political operative, it's never over until it's over for me. But I like where our position is right now, and much more optimistic than we were in 2020.
Yeah.
What about you, Josh?
Yeah, Josh, I'd like to also add to that question, seeing the numbers and how stressful they are and how close they are. Would you think that maybe Harris should have detached from Joe Biden altogether?
I think it's a good question for me in particular because I come from the activist and leftist community organizer world. And so for me, I've never been satisfied with the way that the Harris campaign approached this election, tacking towards the middle or to ambiguity throughout the entire election on many issues. In particular, I've been incredibly frustrated with her failure to properly address the genocide ongoing in Gaza. And so for issues like that, I know that a lot of the voters I've talked to would have been a lot more engaged and activated if they felt like there was a pathway forward on some of those critical issues that are controversial and urgent and require an emphatic stance. I'm actually calling you all here today from a campaign headquarters for a community-based organization here in California that is working with a statewide coalition to pass a lot of bills locally and statewide. And so while all of the news and oxygen is going into the presidential race, I actually share Gabe's point about hope, because I'm incredibly hopeful about the community organizing work that we've done on a local level and some of the incredible candidates and policies we're going to get on the local level that will never make it on the headlines for CNN tonight, will never make it on the headlines of Fox News tonight. And so that's where I'm hopeful. At the same time, no matter what happens, there will be a lot of work to be done because, like I mentioned, Kamala Harris's campaign and her hesitance to take strong stances on issues like the genocide in Gaza, I think lost her a lot of voters here in California, in Michigan, where a lot of Arab Americans were turned off by her vote. And so I think it's a reminder that no matter what happens, we need to create a lot of sustained pressure from the grassroots up to get these politicians, who should not be our heroes, they should be our targets of organizing, to move in the direction we need them to move for a more just approach to United States foreign policy, domestic policy, and our society.
Right. I want to go light on this because we've seen during the campaigns, even the last days of the campaign of Kamala Harris, she has many actually Hollywood A-listers by her side. Do you think that this will, somehow translate into votes? I mean, the supporters of those A-listers?
I mean, I can start and then we can pass it around.
Yeah.
I think that A-listers are a valuable way to drive traffic to your name and to your cause, but John Legend is not going to. If John Legend is deciding your vote or Taylor Swift is deciding your vote, then I think that I would hope that in the long term you have a deeper relationship with how issues impact the communities day to day, right? A-listers are free media and often big donors, and they might help swing a few votes, but no one should build a campaign based on getting a celebrity to take a yes on your name or put their face on your website.
Right. What about you, Gabriel?
I hold the opposite view because I saw the data that, for example, after that Madison Square Garden closing argument from the Trump campaign, and while the Trump campaign does deny that they have ties to that comedian who called Puerto Rico a pile of garbage out in the Pacific, a lot of Puerto Ricans who are in the diaspora in the mainland continental United States actually went out to vote in droves, and a lot of them flipped. Funnily enough, on paper too, is that Puerto Ricans and just Latin Americans tend to lean conservative, tend to lean red, but that was for some one of the final straws, and that really came from after Bad Bunny, Jennifer Lopez, and other Puerto Rican celebrities encouraging that vote. Another aspect too, I remember the last time Josh, John, and I were here hanging out with you all was Taylor Swift was the big conversation.
Yes.
And so as we were opening up today as well, we were talking about the blue wall out in Colorado, Kansas, and Missouri. Now, I will throw my hands up. Obviously, at the wall behind you, Missouri has gone red.
Yeah.
Kansas is going red as well. But, Colorado's still holding strong. Nebraska's actually, according to the AP, splitting their electoral votes. And so the Taylor Swift impact is being felt as well. And so while there isn't a huge study out there on the correlation between A-listers endorsing candidates, it has been reported, though, that a lot of people are going out to vote and are being encouraged to vote because of these A-listers. Hell, even Han Solo and Luke Skywalker endorsed Kamala Harris. And so, and it is known that Harrison Ford has voted previously conservative too, but he's sounding the alarm that if John Kelly and the rest of the conservatives are raising the alarms about Trump, then he's getting out people to vote. And at least for me, I don't know about what Mark Zuckerberg rigged my Instagram algorithm with, but the comments in that comment section on Instagram and Facebook tend to say the story that people are following Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford because of that endorsement.
John, you're shaking your head
No,
there.
John, I'd like to ask you, aside from the celebrity...
I love this question so much.
But John, I'd like
because,
to add to that first. They're talking about celebrity endorsements, right? Now, to counter that, the Republicans had several testimonies on TikTok from actual people hitting back at these celebrities, saying they're living lives of comfort. So how dare they? How dare they talk about who they need? What's your take on this effect?
Oh, it's 100% what you said. I mean, if you think about it, endorsements, and I agree with Josh on this actually, and we're finding something in agreement here. It's great. But the fact of the matter in endorsements on this is, I mean, it's not going to take one celebrity to change one mind. Yes, it's going to increase the motivation and the mobilization efforts. But if you think about the celebrities that have endorsed, when was the last time they've gone to the grocery market themselves and not their personal assistants to go get their own groceries, right? So that shows the out of touch of these, per se, these Hollywood elites, per se. In transition to the endorsements that President Trump has had in terms of the more popular podcasts or folks in the celebrity side, is where he's gone into those podcasts and showed his authentic self, where he's done 3 hours with Joe Rogan, where voters might not agree with every position he has on them, but they get to hear him as a real person. He gets to hear them in issues that might not be covered by the mainstream media or doesn't have a mainstream talking points, such as where Vice President Harris has been going. I do believe that if Vice President Harris would have gone on these podcasts, that she would have gotten a lot more of these authenticity points from the general voters who was trying to find a way to get to know who she was, instead of the same policy points that they've been hitting on since the beginning. So I do think that in terms of the endorsement, you're going to see the more solid endorsements coming from Robert F. Kennedy, Tulsi Gabbard, these prominent former Democrat presidential candidates moving over to the Republican side and expressing why they're doing that. So I think that hits more into the Republican voters rather than, some of these celebrities that are coming up. But I do agree it adds up to the mobilization, but not in terms of turning people into the ballot box.
How dare you not call Joe Rogan an A-list celebrity or Elon Musk, right? And Paul Broad.
But also, and after that,
my goodness, of course they're A-listers. No, I think the Joe Rogan's
talking point on the garbage was President Biden's talking point while Kamala Harris was in his backyard calling Trump supporters garbage and trying to, change that within the press shop. So all of these have really summed up the movement for the Republican Party. And you're seeing the results tonight.
And the populist narrative, right? It's much easier for Trump to present himself as the alternative, as a man of the people, when it's like not the A-listers on his side. So it's easier for him to pin down the other side as elitist and out of touch. And it's not the first time. I mean, we saw that in 2016 when Trump was getting D-list celebrities. Well, we saw that with Duterte in the Philippines. We saw that in 2022 elections when practically all of the A-lister Filipino celebrities were on the side of the candidates who did not win the election. So I think, contemporary history is very clear. When you get, the more A-lister you get, the more you're vulnerable to the populist counter-maneuver and counter-narrative. And I think, again, Trump did. I mean, I was very impressed with the Joe Rogan interview, not in terms of content, of course. I can question
You have to clear that
But
up.
again, for 3 hours, the stamina, his ability to just go on and tick all the boxes, go from mixed martial arts to Abraham Lincoln, the range. So I think we can talk about what is authenticity, is it contrived or not, but he made a lot of folks, including younger men, to feel, oh, this is a guy I can actually sit down and have a beer with and barbecue with. It's something that a lot of people did not feel with Kamala Harris. I mean, the SNL skit was great. I mean, for Kamala, that was funny, that was great. But is this someone I can sit down and relate to? And I think that relatability factor was not coming out in the much more, some would say, curated messaging that the Kamala campaign put forward. But then again, I'm just shocked why we are not learning anything. I mean, since 2016, I look at 15 different elections, keeps on happening. And we're seeing that the populist playbook works, especially when you don't get the A-lister celebrities.
Yeah, one would argue, this is for John, no? Donald Trump's main goal or campaign would be MAGA, Make America Great Again, American First policy. But one would argue, is it that too good or too bad not to share America with others?
No, I think I don't think that's the premise. The premise is that making sure that us as Americans and the tax-paying Americans is feeling like they're being taken care of. I mean, if you've seen the reason why he's surging up again now is because for the past 4 years, they've seen the decline in some of the things that's going on in their cultural lives, right? When it comes to, especially in the economy and in terms of helping out more of the foreign countries and their wars, while we're having the southern border completely wide open for illegal immigrants to come in. Inflation is sky high. So a lot of people's concerns is, let's fix America first and take care of the tax-paying citizens, while we can also be helping out the rest of the world as well, and being a dominant country in the world's point of view. So that's, I think, his main point of view, and you can see that resonate within his voters that have felt left behind based on the past 8 years of 2 terms of Democrats prior to him and after him on the globalization efforts, right? And so it's been resonating to the voters more in terms of taking care of their own small communities first.
Your thoughts on that,
Wait,
Gabriel?
I'd like to add also, Gabriel, on those 2 things. Your thoughts on that, plus looking at the numbers now, we have already 1 left with the Democrats, which is Michigan. What is your confidence on the chances of your presidential choice as of this moment?
So I will admit, I also have a different map pulled up from the one that you have from the Associated Press. And so what I'm seeing actually too is Arizona is now starting to flip blue and New Mexico is starting to flip blue. And they're currently only reporting 30%, but there's a 2% margin there. So there is a chance. Although Pennsylvania, I say, is tinging a bit red. However, going back to the question of MAGA and then also the chances of my candidate winning, it's very obvious in the campaigns which campaign loves America and which campaign hates America or doesn't think that it's in a great state right now. And currently, Kamala Harris, the entire campaign has just been full of joy. It ended in Philadelphia yesterday with a message of joy, whereas Trump's closing argument was very focused on this is how bad our country is, this is how bad everything is doing. Yet, while we still do talk about Kamala Harris not detaching away from President Biden, we have also recognized Kamala Harris's victories being a part of President Biden and the, I'd say, history of legislative success and policies that they've had. I've said it once and I've said it before, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, Inflation Reduction Act, that sadly killed bill of the Bipartisan Border Act. And so there is a legislative success behind Vice President Harris because she has communicated once that the American dream has worked for her. Republicans and conservatives love talking about we need this country to have people pull up from their bootstraps because if it worked for us, it can work for others. Yet, it's all about a question of opportunity. Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, is the only candidate that would allow undocumented immigrants a pathway to citizenship much quicker than the other candidate. And so when you talk about making America great again, we also talk about what has happened before in the Biden administration of Made in America or even promoting the country, and that is what Kamala Harris is carrying forwards with her momentum, is trying to reignite that energy that she, as a daughter of immigrants, similar to what the conservative messaging is, pulled herself and her family up from her bootstraps and made the American dream work for her across the board with her legislative history and in her own career history as well.
May I ask a question? May I ask a question? Because to what degree for you folks, Kamala was, emphasizing enough or sufficiently her own unique story? Because one of the narratives out there, at least one of the reading, is that perhaps she was quite careful not to overemphasize that she would become a historic president, if ever, the first African-American, first woman, compared to Hillary Clinton, who was absolutely clear about emphasizing the identity aspect of her. That some people feel there was not enough identity politics or emphasis of their distinct background. What is your read of that from a Democratic side? Yeah.
Definitely. So I'll start off prefacing with the bad first. The bad is that the Harris campaign and the Democratic Party kept shoving the narrative of this is a fight for democracy and we have a bigger tent welcoming more people like Liz Cheney and conservatives under our tent. When in reality, Kamala Harris's narrative and every single piece of messaging the campaign has pushed out has been her immigrant background and her story to be relatable. Right. And so while we were talking about earlier on your show about did Biden drop out too late, currently in polls, at least what we were seeing in the New York Times, the BBC, and in Pew, is that post-Biden dropping out, there was that huge jump for Kamala. There was a huge excitement for her because of her story. And wherever she went, especially with the story about her mother when she talked about it at the DNC, and then even her father being a Jamaican, a Jamaican immigrant, and really combining that solidarity with the community, it really played, I will say outright, the identity politics of it all. However, that's once the identity politics started becoming the source of attack from former President Trump and asking is she Asian or is she black? That's when the campaign started changing the narrative and focusing more on the democracy narrative. Right. And so, but my big caveat that I will end on is that in all written pieces form of media, if we look, Vice President Harris actually released op-eds in major racial, ethnic, Asian American news outlets. For us Phil-Ams, it's Asian Journal. And within Asian Journal, while she did talk about that democracy piece more, however, the majority of the piece was talking about how she's relatable to us Filipino-Americans, Chinese Americans, Indian Americans, because of her background coming from an immigrant family. And so, tying it up in a knot, while on social media, the messaging has been all about democracy. The written media that people don't really pick up on has been that immigrant story that's distanced herself away from President Biden.
What about you, Josh? Your thoughts on that?
I think there's a challenge that in the United States, we have this sort of double bind that we have as immigrants, as people of color, and for Kamala Harris as a woman as well. where if you talk too much about your
Right.
identity, you become someone using that card to get ahead. And if you don't talk enough about it, then you're negating or declining the history that brought you where you are. And so I think that tension that folks face, not just in politics, but also in businesses, in your career, in school, there's a lot of ways in which we have to grapple with that tension of identity and how much do we show or not show? How much do we claim or not claim? And so I think in a lot of ways, that's a question that there is no perfect answer to, but the fact that we have to ask that question reflects the fact that in the United States, there is so much work to be done around racial justice, gender justice. The fact that Hillary Clinton lost, talking, as your question asks, quite a bit about her identity as a trailblazer, and the fact that in the same way your question posits that Kamala's not doing it enough, and based on
But
some
can you
results
get
so
that
far,
balance?
seems
Do you
to be
think
losing,
there's
right?
a way to
There's
get that
tension
balance?
there where there may not be a perfect balance to strike. I believe that a better United States would be one in which we could move beyond having to tokenize folks' narratives,
Right.
and really celebrate actually how that creates a better society that we have, right? That's what we want to have, and we're not there yet. Clearly, if this is the conversation we have to have due to the way the elections play out.
Yeah. What about
The lone
what about
Republican.
John?
I mean, obviously, that I think in terms of identity politics, it hasn't worked for her in terms of really convincing the folks to vote for her, because I believe that folks have gotten past that. Americans aren't so focused on who the first is of this blank anymore. They're focused on the reality of the issues, of the policies that the Biden-Harris administration has put forward that has made them less prosperous in their homes and less savings, more of these immigration problems. So despite all the great narratives and the joy and the vibes, the reality of the situation is that the economy in the United States has declined over the Biden-Harris administration. So those are the real issues that are front and center of the minds of the voters. And as I guess you can see again, that's been resulted in the reflections of tonight's early turnout on the election so far. So that's how I would like to kind of comment back on the narrative. But I get it. It makes sense. It sounds good. It's all great. And we should do more to engage more people from different backgrounds to come out and turn out and then be a candidate. But you got to focus on the issues that are really affecting Americans, Filipino-Americans as well, every single day.
All
So.
right. We're gonna leave it at that. We don't have much time
So
anymore.
much to talk about.
But thank you so
can talk
much.
for hours.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Gabriel Young, Jos De Leon, and John Jose. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your insight.
Great, folks.
Thanks for having us.
Right.